Welcome to Better Together, Two Girls in a Bible with Alexis V. Wolf and Sandy Renner. I am Alexis V. Wolf of the Fiery Sword Global Ministries, and you can reach me at www.thefierysword.com.
I'm Sandy Renner, and you can reach my webpage at sandyrenner.net.
And we
are
better together. And we're even better together because we have our dear friend Shenena Jackson all the way from Rock Hill, South Carolina. She and Sandy have been friends for like 500 years. Yeah. We've only been friends for like 30. Yeah. No, like I've known her like what, 4 years, 3 years? Mm-hmm. And you guys go back?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
2008.
2008.
Yeah,
wow,
so a while. Yeah. But we were very impressed by everything Shenena does. She's such an amazing young woman. So we really felt compelled to have her on the show. She'll be on with us again next week. So if you like her testimony today, tune in next week because she'll be back. Yes. So we're very excited. Sandy, what you got?
Shenena's a minister in her own right, too. So she's not just some guest. And the girl can sing.
Yes,
she's just got a beautiful voice. I just love to hear her sing. Not just because she's greatly gifted, but she's greatly anointed to do it.
And there's a difference.
That's the most awesome thing. And you know what? The two of us, we can talk, right? So we're going to just shut up and shut to the up, I'm serious. And we're going to let Shenena talk about Shenena, which she does not do unless you pull it out of her. So,
and let's say this. So what we are planning, it is in the very early planning stages. The three of us plus another dear friend of ours, Verdonna Street, we're going to have a conference, I guess, like a day conference.
Yeah.
Somewhere toward July and December. Yes. So we're not sure. We want to have one in Columbia and then one in Rock Hill as well, because Shenena and Verdonna have both dealt with sexual molestation and things like that, sexual abuse and assault and abandonment, many issues. And so then Sandy and I will come in and talk about how do we heal from those places. Right. And so we are excited to later have Verdonna on the show whenever we can get our schedules together. But we wanted to have Shenena on because we are going to have this conference as soon as we can get our ducks in a row. But it's vital to have you talk about the things that have gone on in your life. Yeah. Just say, I went from here to here. Because Sandy and I, we both have autobiographies, so we've written our junk. Yeah. So I've written more junk than Sandy.
I've watched this young lady. I've watched her just bloom. She knew the Lord when I met her, but there was some real trauma going on in her life at that time. And
tell that story real quick, the short version. And then because it actually sets the stage for how Shenena came about to be with us.
Okay, so the group of ministers that I was associated with was eating in a restaurant one day, and I wasn't there, but the story was told to me. Shenena heard them talking about Jesus, and she walks up to them and says, "Do y'all let black people in your church?" And of course, if I'd have been there, I would have said, "You're black?" So anyway, later, the pastor, Chuck, he calls me and says, "I have this girl, we met her in the restaurant, blah, 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 and she just really needs some mentoring. She needs some inner healing and some help." And I said, "Okay, have her call me." So Shenena did call me one night, but it was about 9 o'clock in the evening.
Fun.
My granddaughter, this was before I married Ray, and my granddaughter was in one end of our mobile home, and I on the phone with Shenena, and she told me that she was headed to the hospital to sign herself in on the psychiatric floor because she was just overwhelmed with grief and just things she's dealing with. And I said, "Please don't do that. If unless you're feeling that desperate, I can't leave the house right now because I had my granddaughter." And I said, "So if you can make your way out here, let me see if I can minister to you first." Is that correct so far?
Yes.
And so she gets there, and I've done this for 40 plus years. So I know if a person is to a place they're going to go sign themselves on a psychiatric ward, they're going to be over the top emotional. It's just the way it is. And so I thought, I'm going to bring her back into my bedroom where there's some space between us and my granddaughter. And I shut the door and I turned the fan on trying to get some, because it's a small mobile home. And I put Shenena from it. And all of a sudden, this blood curdling animalistic scream comes from this beautiful little mouth, and I'm going, oh dear. Okay then. And that started us on a journey of walking through some deliverance and inner healing and mentoring through the years. She has blessed me every bit as much as I have blessed her in the ministry.
Wow.
So that's where you go from here, girl.
Jump.
Yeah. And it's trauma is trauma, and I say that because everybody's trauma is different. How they deal with it is different. Unfortunately, I came from a family where we just didn't share things. I was going through a separation at the time. I was, in a bad marriage, and my son was 1.5 years old. I knew I had to leave because I had became a threat to myself. And so I said, if I don't get out of this, I'm going to hurt myself, and I'm not going to have, my son's just not going to have a mom to raise him. So I remember I left, and but to kind of start from the beginning, I was molested at the age of 6 and 8 years old by my next door neighbor. And he had a sister that used to always read books to me, so it was normal for me to go over and she'd read to me, and we'd just sit together in the sun together. And
You weren't trying to get a tan, were you?
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's a good question. Vitamin D though.
I gotcha.
And she wasn't there that day, and I remember her brother let me in. He said, she'll be here in just a little bit. Come on in. You can watch TV. He let me have a drink of water. And I had to go to the bathroom. And so I remember he said, yeah, go ahead. It's upstairs. And I remember he followed me there. And I thought, well, this is strange. But I just said, well, maybe he just didn't want me to get lost. So he followed me, and he shut the door, but he was looking through the crack of the door. And I thought, well, it made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything because he was a friend of the family. So I didn't really think it was a threat to me. But and then he comes in, and he exposes himself to me. And he says, do you know what this is? And I say, yes. And he wanted me to touch it. And I did, because he's standing right in front of me. I'm sitting on the toilet.
And you're 6 years old.
I'm 6 years old.
You could not have been in a more vulnerable place.
Exactly.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, well, what happens if I don't? So I did. And he's like, well, are you finished? And I said, yes. And so he's watching me clean myself. And then he touches me before I get my clothes on. And so this was the first incident. But the second incident was, I was at my neighbor's house, and we were playing hide and go seek. And he happened to come around the corner and see us playing, and I was hiding. Same person, exactly. And I was hiding behind one of the bushes, and he saw me there, and he came to hide with me, pretend like he was playing hide and go seek, and then he asked me, asked me, have I ever played the touch game or something? I don't remember exactly, and I said no. And then he asked me, just zip my pants down, and then he touched me again, and and I remember zipping my pants back up. But it's funny how the enemy makes you feel like it's your fault.
Of course.
Because when you're young and you especially know someone, it's I don't want to say it's easy to give in, but you don't quite know what's going on. Your mind can't quite comprehend what's going on. So you give in because you're afraid, because you don't know what the consequences are going to be. And so, I submitted myself to that. And it reminded me of what happened to my friend that I was playing hide and go seek with, because the same thing happened to her. And to this day, I think about, well, maybe that's why she's not married. And maybe that's why she has phobias today with being around people. And that just kind of made me remember why she is very reclusive today. But I remember telling my parents, I didn't tell them, I think I was 32 maybe, when I told them what happened.
Wow.
And they actually thought it was funny.
Wait. What?
They thought it was, I don't know if they thought it was funny, but they giggled as if to say, well, it was just child's play. Because
How old was the perpetrator?
I was about to ask.
he
that.
was, he was 7 years older than me.
Oh my gosh. So he was twice your age. Do you think also maybe your giving in, as you put it, was due to the fact that his sister was your friend and you was afraid of alienating a friend?
Yeah.
We can get crazy sense of loyalty sometimes. And so somebody listening to this might think, well, she submitted to that. She gave in to that. Look, a young child does a lot of things that they have no explanation for out of some sense of
Obligation.
Yes, exactly.
Afraid to alienate her friend, maybe afraid to stir up a fuss. There could just be all kind of things going through that little young head.
Exactly.
And so then you're 32 and you tell your parents and they giggle. Now let's give the pros and cons of that. One, maybe they wasn't sure if they believed her. Maybe they didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
What do you say after from 6 to 32? Start berating her? Why didn't you tell us? Maybe they just didn't know how to handle it well and they just blew it off. We don't know.
Yeah. But it's funny because right after the incident happened, and I think I was 8 this time, so it was 6 and 8. And I remember I wanted to tell my brother so bad. And I said, Jack, I called him Jack at the time. I said, I want to tell you something, but I don't want you to get mad. And I remember he said, go ahead, just tell me. And I said, Mark touched me. And he said, no, he didn't. I said, he did. I remember the anger on his face. And
you were 8 at the time when you told him?
Yes.
Okay.
And I knew that he was getting ready to do some damage. And I remember I said, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And he said, are you sure you're kidding? And I said, yes. I'm just kidding. And I just remember I was like, whew, because I knew he was getting ready to hurt somebody, and I didn't want an issue with my next door neighbor, and I didn't want the young lady that would read to me periodically to have any anger or animosity towards me. So
that really explains a lot to me, Shenena, of why you're always so apologetic to everybody if you feel like you've interrupted their life on some level.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that.
I just saw that very clearly. And
wow.
And you learned to keep your mouth shut, didn't you?
Yeah.
Because who can you trust? And that's what happens to a lot of people. Who can I trust? I don't want my family getting angry enough to do something that's going to cause them to get in trouble. I don't want to stir up no dirt over here. And you put all this responsibility on this young kid.
Wow.
And that young kid grows up into a young person and just says, it's just not important to tell it anymore.
Right.
But it is important, isn't it? It is important to tell it.
It is important, considering the fact that I remember I developed migraines at this age, at 8. And I didn't know where they were coming from. And I wish I had a psychologist or someone that I could have talked to at the time. but again, at 8 years old, third grade, I'm just thinking, I'm just having headaches. And still today, I still battle with migraines, but I know that by me sharing my testimony, I believe that there's going to be a release from some things. I believe that when people hear what I've been through, at such a young age, and part two would be a continuation of this, but being molested at such a young age opens a young person up to a mind of sexuality like never before.
It wakens it. Listen, God, for anybody who out there might judge the rest of this testimony, let me assure you what happened to her and many other young people, it is very normal. God made us to be sexual beings. Now, he wanted restraint, and he wanted us to do it in this right timing, but our bodies don't always get the message of when the right timing is, when something's already been pushed to its limit, violated. So I've heard this from many rape victims and people who have been molested against their will. Even though it's against their will, it still awakens their body to that sexual pleasure. It really does. And you have to be very careful not to become judgmental when you hear these testimonies.
And I remember, I believe I was 9 or 10. I believe I masturbated for the first time, and it's so funny saying this because when I was in the third grade, unfortunately, I was around people that were already sexually active.
Other third graders?
Other third graders, their parents would have pornography tapes all over the place. So they were talking about sex in the third grade. So it was almost like, I don't want to say I didn't have you would think I didn't have a fighting chance to live a life of purity. I did keep my virginity until marriage, but it was out of fear because after the second molestation, I became a victim at school. It was almost like
A sign is hung
a
on your
sign
eye.
was hung
Big bullseye.
saying
Get her.
feel her. And I would be in these situations where I would have guys, like 3 guys at the most, surrounding me, cornering me, and hunching me. And I felt obligated. I felt like, again, in that situation, like I have to, because if I don't know, are they going to harm me even more if I don't? And I would want to tell my mom. Actually, I did tell my mom. And I remember her telling me, now, if they feel on you, you're going to get pregnant. And I remember being in the 4th grade, coming home and watching my belly every day to see if I was pregnant.
Oh.
I mean, I can laugh about it now.
We can laugh now, but
that
boy, that wasn't funny then, was it?
What a nightmare.
No. So I would just pull my shirt up because I thought I was pregnant. So, but that was just her way of protecting me, but
Thinking she was protecting you.
Yeah, thinking she was protecting me.
It's not real protective.
Well, I'm sure no one talked to her about sex. And so,
Right.
Listen, sex hasn't always been so widely talked about as it is today. And so many times parents didn't talk to their children about sex, so their children didn't talk about sex. But trust me, everybody was doing it. They just wasn't talking about it.
Exactly.
And even couples today that do a lot of it, they don't ever really talk to one another.
That's so true.
Such a breakdown in
And I pointed that out not because I want to insult your mother. I mean,
Oh.
and I want the viewers to understand this
okay.
because what we need to understand is that parents need to talk to their children.
Oh,
Yes. And
I
listen
talked to my
them.
girls very, very, very young because my uncle
Mm-hmm.
tried many times to molest me until one day my mother's like, okay, if anybody ever touches you, because my mother was molested by multiple people. And so only, I was like, oh, well, Uncle Jimmy, da-da-da-da. She's like, what? And I mean, all hell broke loose. Because that's all I'm saying. When my dad found out, it was a very ugly thing. And my grandmother actually stopped speaking to my mother and said, because you said this about Jimmy, your brother, you're dead to me. So I understand. I mean, so we're talking about generations who didn't know they could talk to their kids, didn't know
Right.
how to talk to their kids. But we as parents need to be honest with our children and tell them the ins and outs to protect our children.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember 5th grade, I was introduced to pornography through a babysitter of mine. And this was her way of keeping us occupied. And it was absolutely just...
Wait, so cartoons were not on the table?
I was going to say
Just
some cartoons.
pornography.
Captain, in my
I
day,
mean,
Captain
anything.
Kangaroo wasn't
Right.
around. I mean,
Tom and Jerry, I mean, Bugs Bunny.
I would have rather give me a deck of cards or something. I mean, just...
There are about 5 million
come
other
on.
things she could have done.
but this is also how the enemy of our soul
Mhm.
creeps in through other avenues and people. We don't know what that babysitter was thinking. Maybe she'd been exposed to it and it was normal to her. Who knows?
It was crazy, and we were just horrified. I mean, I just remember her face when she was leaving the room, like, okay, enjoy. And I was just like, wow.
I'm sorry, I'm
It's
trying
like
to not
we
be
were
absolutely
just,
mortified at this moment.
and just the things that, they were sodomizing her, and just, it was just multiple partners, and
Well, it's pornography.
I mean, it's just
So that
things
only
your
fed your
mind-
fear, the fear you already had started developing.
right.
So it wasn't fully that you kept pure to your marriage in that
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
It was
'cause I was-
fear. You wasn't motivated by the love of Christ to be
Right.
pure. It was motivated by fear. Thinking, okay, if I do sex, this is what sex is. This is why pornography is so dangerous on any level, especially for men, married men.
Yes.
They think that, listen, it is impossible for a woman to
Live up to that
live up to
expectation.
that expectation. And
Yeah.
pornography is such a dangerous thing.
It is.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
It is, and the sad part is those images don't ever leave.
Never leave.
It's a permanent scar on your conscious.
And it comes up at the craziest times, like when you're praying,
Right.
when you're really trying to
Right.
get into the Lord. I've had preachers admit this to me, that in talking with them, they say, Cindy, something I did way back there, something that was kind of pushed on me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm praying, I'm really trying to get for the presence of God, and what pops up like a big video screen,
Yeah.
this pornography that I once saw or saw for the 100th time, whatever, doesn't matter. And it never does leave.
It doesn't, even being at that age, those images still, like, they're still in my head, and it's just, I never shared, I didn't share that part with people, and it's just, later on, those things don't creep up until you're older. And what I mean is, things creep up, I became addicted to pornography at a later age. Maybe, now some of these times are blur, but I would say maybe around 34 I became addicted to pornography. And you would think I wouldn't.
Well, you would think people who are raised in alcoholic home would never touch it, but they
Mhm.
do.
And I was
And there are demonic forces behind this.
Oh,
that
absolutely.
preyed on
Yeah,
us. So I think
that's
that needs to be clear to
Yes.
the listening audience, that there are demonic forces that attach themselves to all these things.
Yeah, exactly. And the addiction is very sneaky.
Mhm.
Next thing you know, you're watching it for 5 minutes, and next thing you know, it's 2 hours, and next thing you know, you're planning your whole day around it, and your life. I mean, at this point, is just
It's a drug.
it's a drug, and then you have to battle with the guilt afterwards, and then
Shame.
it's so many different emotions tied, to that. And one day, the Lord showed me how fake it was. And when I say I'm so glad He did, I remember there was a young lady on there, and she was saying something. She was in pain in the midst of filming, and her partner said, "We need to stop filming because she's hurting." And I just remember, oh my
This
goodness,
is a performance.
this is just.
It's a performance.
And it reminded me of how I felt when I was molested, and I thought, you know what? I'm so glad that He showed me that, because that was such a breaking moment, a reality moment for me.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't want to be a victim anymore. I don't want to be a victim anymore. And I knew watching that was allowing me to still live in this life of being a victim. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It
Well,
does.
not only does it victimize you, we participate. If we're watching pornography, we are participating in making a victim of these people who are so deceived.
Right.
That's making these films. They think they're just creating something for money or whatever.
And many of them are in sex slavery.
They are in sex slavery as well.
Many of them.
And we're participating in supporting that.
Yep.
So not only you may think you're just an innocent spectator behind your screen at home in the safety of your little den or bedroom or whatever. No, you're participating in the violation of those young women and men, because they're deceived. They're victims of Satan as well.
Yeah.
Michael had my husband, and I've written about this, so I have permission to talk about this, but he had a porn addiction because it was in his household, just like all those kids you were talking about. It's always there. And back in the day, I mean, I guess it's like, well, if it's in my home, I don't have to hide it. It's in my home. I don't know. I mean, but I knew a lot of kids whose dad, let me not get it. Anyway, it goes on a lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
it does.
And his addiction, manifest. It's a whole other thing. We were talking about you. Anyway, and so one day when the Lord revealed this, and the Lord did it in a very Lord-like way, was
As
not
only He can do.
as only
Right.
He could do.
He wasn't out to punish
And I
lightly.
said, do you not understand that these are someone's mothers, wives,
Mothers.
children, daughters, aunties, nieces? These are people's people.
Yeah.
These people are not nothing. They're not cartoons. These are real people being abused, or they're abusing themselves if they're doing it of their own volition.
for various reasons.
And what
Right.
that does to the psyche, and it ruins marriages, it ruins homes, it ruins, I mean, saying it, you and I mean, story after story after story
we
after
hear it
story.
all the time.
And there was one time I picked up a tape in our house. This is before everything was really discovered, and I was like, oh, what is, like, that is burned on my brain, like, and it will pop up, and it's like, oh dear God, I don't, and it just, you can't unsee.
Yeah.
You can't unsee this stuff.
Yeah. You can.
We were ministering to a lady some time ago, and her husband had gotten into pornography, and he got so much that he could not have relations with his wife, and so they lived for many years, still married, but very
Over 20 years.
separated in that area of their life, and she's still battling the effects of that today.
Now that he's dead.
Listen, this is not a harmless thing. How much time do we have? I want to ask her a question, but we can wait.
What does that say? 20. Oh, you got about 2 minutes. How did 30 minutes?
Okay. When we come back to the
Trying to read the
next
clock.
session, we'll ask her a question. I think it needs to be asked. Why would you openly share this, Naomi? This
I was going to ask the same question.
Personal,
Okay.
very personal, very intimate, information, that why would you share that? So we'll talk about that some in the
Awesome.
next week.
Am I reading that correctly? It's 20. Yeah. All right. So listen, if you just tuned in, wow, it just went by so fast.
Yeah.
You are listening to Better Together, Two Girls in a Bible with Alexis B. Wolf. That is me. Sandy Renner. That is her. Our dear friend and guest, Shenena Jackson, discussing her trials and tribulations of being molested and what that's done to her, and how you've gotten some soul healing and what
Yes.
that really looks like. Because Sandy, it is so vital. Because I think, so, and I'm sure you've experienced this, that you hide it. We don't want it to. And then when you
Right.
do, someone laughs at you. People who should
Yeah.
embrace you and help you,
Right.
whether they meant to or didn't mean to. But the how, and listen, my mother, me, I mean, almost probably 9 out of 10 women have experienced, and I just made up
some
that
level.
number. I don't know what the number is, but it's high.
Yeah.
And everyone won't talk about it.
Right.
this
And so
openly.
it's vital that we discuss these things so that we can help the viewer or someone you know, if you're a viewer, to go, there is healing on the other side of this.
It is.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Listen, you guys have a blessed week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Listen, like, share, comment, ask questions. We love questions. We
Yes.
love interaction with our audience. So we would love to discuss whatever you want to hear. So you guys be blessed.
Shalom.